Oh no. This is a Star Trek Changing Worlds review. This is the Elysian Kingdom. Silly Kelly's episode. They did a Silly Trek episode. So. They literally did a Silly Trek episode. They go into a nebula that literally like pulls them into a weird storybook they have on the ship, the Elysian Kingdom storybook. I'm assuming that's fictional because Elysian is literally Sillian Realms. That's literally what the Elysian girl is. The girl is literally that. In the original 80s version, she was the Libyan because she was named her, as her name was Libyan, and therefore the Libyan. Because her name was Libby. See? And Chris was her sister. They were twins. So there's so in this story they go, well, we changed that in the Elysian stories in Sillian Realms because, yeah, we weren't trying to offend Libya. We were just her name sounded funny. Same thing with the other story with the Hungolians as well. Same thing. We didn't know any better. We just did it. Yeah. So here we have them in a Sillian Realm thing. They're trapped in a nebula, like an anomaly. And in the nebula, the reality is bent and changed and formed around them. The doctor takes a blast from his thing to the face. That's not what did it, though. I guess it sort of. He was trying to fix the transporter girl. His daughter's in the transporter. He's trying to fix that. Reading her story, and then she might not get out. She wanted to change the ending, so the entity that's in the nebula saw that and took her out of the transport, made her the sorcerer's stone, kind of philosopher's stone kind of thing, out of her. So she's the philosopher's stone in the story. I think they called her something else, but philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone is an alchemic thing from fantasy. They made it a rock in Harry Potter, but it's actually a concoction in Arthurian legends and stuff. So the Merlin wizard guy, the Merlin wizard, and the chief engineer is the Merlin wizard, and we have the Spock wizard. We don't know who the other ones are. Uhura's, of course, the evil ice queen, of course. Dr. Mbenga is the king, and the captain is a sniveling consort guy, and the others are chewing scenery, and the ship has been modified into this weird cross between Masks and Squire of Gothos, and any number of earlier episodes. The Cat's Paw classic episode. You could change the bridge set around to look like something else. In Masks, they did that. Not one of the better TNG episodes, but also a Silly Kelly one. So we gotta give it some credit. Yeah. So back in the day. So yeah. But yeah. Yeah. So 5 hours of time and space has been altered in the story. And we learned that the daughter has communed with the alien, and she gets to stay with the alien, but because she's been in the transporter buffer for like years, it ages her up so that she's older. It's similar in plot to the weird alien fantasy thing, Sillian story that was on the Orville last week. So similar to that. Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. So odd. Yeah, that one it was a high school, and then it was a plane, and then it was a stairway to nowhere, and that kind of thing. So in this one, it was all a kingdom on a ship. It was very similar to the Space Vanguard's rejected episodes from way back in the day when it was Starcrackers, including the Colonel's Tale 1 and 2, and the circus episodes and that kind of thing. sort of Fantasyland Q type stories, which were ultimately put in Space Time I instead, because they didn't really fit in the rewrite of that series too well. So they were ultimately rejected. But there were guides and summaries on Google Plus before that disappeared, and they clearly read them and said, "Let's do that. Let's do the Colonel's Tale." Cool. All right. Let's do the circus one too a little bit. Ice Queen one. Let's do that one too. They probably didn't. They probably did get it from, let's just say, the source wasn't so together. But the name, the Elysian Kingdom, and what they're doing in it, and their Libyans, is uncanny. They're not technically Libyans, but kinda. The Queen is acting like that. Now, to be fair, in the original '80s Sillian stories that we had at our high school, they weren't making fun of African people at all. They were just, her name sounded like, and it was the '80s, and Libya was a rogue nation at that point. And yeah, from what we didn't really realize or know or whatever, sure, rogue nation. Yeah, let's have a. Yeah, let's do that. There was a Libyan, and Afghan rebels and stuff like that back then. So, and that too. So we didn't know. We had no idea what we were doing. We just thought, oh, her name sounds like that. And also, we got it from Back to the Future. First, the Libyans were in Back to the Future as well, which in this one scene. So we made this a girl who we went to school with, the quintessential enemy character in the story, which was mean. And when she runs around, gets weapons and runs around, shoots everybody. But that may sound awful, like school shooting, but no, it wasn't, because it was the '80s and there was no such thing as that, and we stole that from a movie. So yeah, the movie was not Deal of the Century, but one of those. There was a scene where that happened. But not for real. It was like comical pretend. It was all comical pretend. Whenever she attacked somebody, it would be cartoony. It would be like bangs coming out of toy guns and water guns and stuff. Yeah, no actual violence. It was very PG, not G. So nobody actually dies. They get blasted through the air. Yeah, it's all pretend, silly, like high school stuff. So. Yeah, but in this story, they figured, well, let's go back to the roots of that character, of that name, and do them as actual people from Libya or Africa or some part of Africa, because we got Mbinga there, so let's do that. It's like, that's not what we did though. So they went further. It was not the original Sillian Realms at all. They went there. And it was like, we weren't making fun of the Africans, but yeah, they went there with this episode and said, okay, yeah, he's the king, and they're like, he's the queen, the evil queen, and they're gonna fight. So they went there, but she's actually closer to the Jezebel character from the Starcracker story, the Colonel's Tale, which did appear at Evergreen College, the Colonel's Tale, Starcracker story. It was presented in class, in a writing class, and it's assumed that. There must have been somebody from Strange New Worlds writing team back then in that college class. And they said, this is great. I'm going to write this down, and years later I'm going to use it in the story. And I don't know where I got it. You got it from us. You got it from us. In our version, yeah. So we weren't paid. They just used it. But yeah, it's a local Asian. Yeah, and he went there. And because I think at Pine Hill, they didn't really have a diverse cast. There were a very small school of hundreds of students, very small. They didn't have an Asian student. I don't think they did. They didn't really have an Asian student. We added one in Fictional Adventures, but didn't really have one. There were 2 black kids. Well, technically half. One of them was half. Eric was half. Bryce was fully black. At one point, there were three. There was Latanya, who briefly in high school I dated. So I don't know if that means anything, but probably not. It didn't work. But yeah, in high school years ago. So, but yes, that was Marleisha. There were four at that point, but then there were two. By senior year, there were two. In '89, so some of them left. But yeah, they were almost all white. So what would we know about any of that stuff in the world? We didn't. But they don't make it entirely offensive. They don't make it like it's Code of Honor. It almost goes to Code of Honor territory, but not quite on that TNG episode. Almost does. Almost. Yeah, it's it. Except they're playing it for laughs. So. And actually, Ortegas is named after a preliminary character from the original script of The Cage. Well, they changed her name in the Cage story, but there's an earlier script where she's actually a character. So Uhura shouldn't be there yet, but oh well. Yeah. So it's a goofy Arthurian sort of King Arthur, kind of King Arthur crossed with the Queen of Katwe, oddly enough, crossed with that chess movie, crossed with there's also an ancient African tale that it's sort of kind of loosely based on about another queen that was an ice queen and stuff. It's kind of like that. There's a lot of fairy tale elements that yeah. So they are paying homage to something, but it's just generic. It sounds like the story of the brothers in the Savannah story. I forget what it's called. That they have not done a Disney movie out of because it would be too dark. Elements of it appeared in a Disney movie called The Princess and the Frog. Elements of that story are in there. It's the magician guy with powers. And that's in this. So clearly they've seen Princess and the Frog at least, which is cool. Yeah. So yeah, it's very very odd. Yeah, the in the original Starcracker story, The Colonel's Tale, it was a spoof of 13th century, the Chaucer era. So they all talked in Old English speak in the episode, and they went down to the planet. And the character that was Big Tim, he rode a horse at one point. The character that was Asloth, he the Techite half dog man. He had he was good at chess. Clark and Henderson both were good with a bow and arrow because Mark's Cards is good with a bow and arrow. So there was a scene where they have to shoot them arrows. The sniveling character was of course Henderson in the story, but this made up character. That's in there, and Pike plays Henderson in this, which is yeah, he's clearly seen it. There's Henderson, and Mbinga is sort of Clark in this. You know, he's the doctor, so he's sort of Clark, but he's sort of Kimchi, which is interesting. Oh my, because she was the counselor in it. She was playing the princess. There was an evil princess, the Jasmine stuff, the Jezebel character. It's all over the place, but yes, yeah, there was no violence at the school at Pine Hill. We were just making up stuff. It was silly Trek. It was Star Trek with silly characters. A role-playing game, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons but in space. So now they've done the reverse. Dungeons and Dragons in space, but with a nebula doing it. It is odd that they abruptly end the story arc of the girl in the transporter beam. With this episode, they just abruptly end that. Oh, she gets to go be with the alien. Or something. But then they cut to the sick bay where everything is okay and stuff, and it's odd that they do the whole millennial thing like they did with the They've had this trouble with this series and over there at the Star Wars at Disney as well. having your last act kind of not wrap things up and just jump ahead. Like, oh, off screen things happened where everything's back to normal. And 5 hours went by and yeah, well, you weren't looking. It's like, no, you kind of have to show a little bit of that. You kind of can't just jump a little bit ahead and say, oh, things happened that they don't remember. Show the captain at least going, what happened to me? Oh, I dreamt that I was a sniveling, whining guy. Oh no. And the Spock guy's all, actually, it was quite disturbing, Captain. I apparently was some sort of evil wizard. Then have Ortega say, well, I was a badass. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, Khan was somebody else. You know what's confusing is Khan and Una and the other lady. There's three of them. They do look different, but their characters aren't different. So I was getting confused as to who was what. Ortega's has short hair, yes, but the other brunettes yeah, they could be twins. They're not, but they could be. So that's, I guess, my review of Elysian Kingdom, the Silly Kelly episode of the series. Definitely lower decks silliness in it, which is a welcome change from the drier episodes of Discovery and so forth. They should have had humor. Not sarcastic, mean humor, but weird humor and twisted adventure in Nebula. A Boltzmann brain nebula, apparently, which isn't quite what they did, but they mention it. Boltzmann brain is an energy field that would achieve consciousness by being an energy field. But isn't quite what it is. It's actually more like a computer that's been built that achieves consciousness. They're probably thinking of a Matryoshka brain, which is a computer that's achieved consciousness. More than a Boltzmann brain is, it's sort of its own thing. It's not. They were thinking of a Matryoshka. They were thinking of the other thing, which is the nesting doll brain. It's a thing within a thing within a thing. The Russian nesting doll brain. Yes. So the Elysian. We have to use Elysian. Now Elysian is also a beer. I figured that when we changed the name from Libyan to Elysian, that having it be that name worked better because then they would just think it's a beer. It is a place on Earth, but it's not a rogue nation. Now, in the early 2000s, they referenced that story again when they were sort of allies with the Shell Oil Company, so we liked them at that point. So it was okay to use Libyan there. And since those two twins have responded on the MySpace years later and said, yeah, you can include us in Sillian Saga. We're fine with that. Yeah. Because of Borg or something, yeah. So at one point they're Borg. At one point they become Q-like because, of course. Yeah, Q-like. Actually, they were kind of doing Q-like stuff in this. I would have been okay with them referencing Q here, but they didn't. Yeah, I think they're actually supposed to be the ANR, the anarchy, the creature's Q was going to blow away in a puff of wind at one point. I think that's who they were supposed to be. So they're Q-like, but they're energy beings. Ooh, also similar to the companion from the classic Trek. So it had a lot of elements of the other Trek. They could just say, oh, it's from those other things. We weren't copying this random guy in California. No, not at all. They could say that too. They could say that they just borrowed from 3 different other things and just came up with the same idea at the same time. Yeah, now you totally took it from Sillian Space. Come on. You read Sillian Realms. And do read more Sillian Realms. Go on YouTube and read Starship Locations and Sillian Realms and find out more about what they're going to crib next season.